I searched my sister's name on the dark web. I now know why she went missing. I've always heard of the horrifying stories surrounding the dark web. At first I didn't believe any of it, which is why I felt safe going on there. I just didn't expect it to lead me to find the terrifying truth of my sister's disappearance. My sister and I have always been really close, which is why I was distraught when she went missing 4 years ago. We called the police, who launched an investigation, but after 6 months of searching, they declared it a cold case. All they had were 2 photos uploaded from her phone that were taken in such dark lighting that nothing could be identified from it, or so they thought. Ever since she went missing, I've tried everything to find her. I uploaded her photos online, talked to all her friends, and even hired a private investigator. After none of that worked, I decided to turn to the dark web. I thought maybe I could find someone who could solve this mystery. Everything was going smoothly at first, but then I stumbled upon a website that would ruin my life forever. After clicking on it, I saw dozens of pages of kids who had gone missing. There was a price attached next to their names, and it was clear that this website was a space for criminals to sell their victims. I looked up my sister's name, and then my heart dropped. I saw pictures of her, but this one was different. They weren't asking for money. I didn't know what they wanted. After taking a closer look at these photos, I was able to identify the hotel they were staying in, but it was all the way in Brazil. I'd never really left the country before, of course, but I fought down the nervousness and did my best to research everything I could. The hotel was near a popular tourist destination, so I thought that it couldn't possibly be that dangerous. Looking back, I should have been more careful. Maybe it could have saved my life. After my flight landed, I made my way to the hotel. I sat by the wall air conditioning unit until I'd recovered, and then I looked around my room. I then realized that I'd come to the right place. The wallpaper was the same pattern from the photo, and the bed, mirror, and clock were all the right design. I saw my sister's photos on a bulletin board by the front desk, among others. The concierge soon approached me when he saw me studying the pictures. I touched the pinned papers. These photos. The older Brazilian man sighed. Very stupid, very bad. She went on a hike and never returned. He waved his hands for a moment before seeming to settle. The jungle. It eats people here. That was something more than the gossip back home about the incident. A hike? He replied. Yes, a hike in the jungle. Everyone knows you shouldn't stay there during the night. I asked him, is it safe to go alone during the day if I stick to the marked paths? He glared, but drew lines for me on a local map to show me where the girls had said they were hiking. I don't want to put your picture up here too, he said. It's possible she's still alive if the jungle did not find her at night. Hurt maybe. It's sad. I gulped, but put on a brave face. What was I doing? And why? I clutched the local map and adjusted my backpack as the concierge went back to his duties. I should have listened to his warning. I made my way to the hiking trail. It was humid as hell and stuffy under the thick canopy of gloom and green, but I'd somehow stumbled my way into a mission, and I couldn't turn back without hating myself. Where would she have gone? For hours, I followed the path they'd indicated to the concierge until I reached a fork in the narrow, overgrown trails. One path followed the black line he'd drawn, and the other led to what looked like a gorgeous waterfall basin. Maybe she'd gone the less traveled path in the hopes of taking gorgeous pictures for her online profiles. I carefully made my way down the waterfall and then nearly stumbled over a shoe. It was a dirty American sneaker, and I picked it up to examine it. Jumping back and letting out a short scream of shock, I threw it down on the ground. It had a foot in it, a goddamn foot. Holding back overwhelming revulsion, I peeled back the tongue of the sneaker to confirm it was a female foot. I can still remember the swarming flies and budding maggots in that stump of red flesh. I leaned back against the root-sprouting dirt wall behind me and tried not to throw up. I'd come all the way out here to find a rotting foot. I checked my cell phone. No signal, of course. I couldn't see the sun through the maze of greenery above, but my phone said it was getting late on the schedule I'd set for myself. Dusk would be coming, and it was time to head back. Even though I'd ignored the warning about climbing, I intended to heed the one about avoiding nighttime. Every single bush and hillock out here hid something alive, and I didn't want to see what might emerge in the dark. And then I heard her. Help! It was the faintest echo through the dense foliage, but I was dead certain it had been a hopeless female shout. I shouted back a half-dozen times, even screaming until my throat was raw, but she didn't seem to hear me in return. Or maybe she was incapable of shouting again. It hit me. One rotting foot didn't mean my sister had died. If only I'd gone home 30 seconds earlier, I would never have kept looking. Eventually, the terrain became more like a canyon with a river at the bottom, and I was forced to lift up onto dirt again. Here I found an animal trail splitting off in 3 directions. A cell phone with a cracked screen lay half buried. I brushed it off to discover that it still had some battery power and that it was not password protected. The text messages were mostly mundane conversations from the owner to her friends. The most recent ones were variations on asking for help. There was no information there about what had happened. But then I checked the pictures on her camera. Beyond all the typical selfies and photos of the airport, the flight, and the hotel, there were a few of the jungle I'd just traversed, the waterfall, and then the very path I was standing on. The next picture seemed to be taken from hiding. Between the leaves, the image showed a man brandishing a knife and peering into the underbrush opposite. I still couldn't see his face, but he was dressed in local wear I recognized from the shop. Had he seen the girls at the hotel and followed them out here? This was serious. I needed to be ready for a fight or to run. Suddenly tense, I put my backpack down, hid it under a few bushes. I then swiped slowly through the photos. The next few were of the trail I was on, and I followed it step by step, retracing the path the girls had gone. The man was not in these pictures. They seemed to be photos of landmarks that might help them find their way back. Many were blurry and had been taken in haste. No doubt they'd been running. I couldn't shout anymore either, not without potentially revealing my presence to that man. Had he cut off one of the girl's feet or something? How had her foot ended up back by that waterfall? Swipe. There's the rock. Swipe. Okay, there's the bend in the path. Swipe. There's the arranged stones to mark a direction when no other landmark would suffice. A few more swipes, and I was back where I'd started. The animal trails split off in 3 directions, and I could hear the river out beyond the trees. So they'd come full circle by accident, realized they were lost. Then what? Dropped their phone here in frustration? Or had they run into the man with the knife again and gotten caught? If there were 3 paths out of here and 2 looped to one another, that meant the middle one had to go elsewhere, right? I heard a noise behind me, whirled, saw nobody and nothing. I stared out into the jungle as dusk swept a dim shroud between the trees. I'd stayed too long and night was almost upon me. I had to go home. What was I going to do? Fight a knife-wielding madman in the dark? I could get the cops and bring down the cavalry. And then I heard her. Help! It came from down the middle path. As it became harder and harder to see, I crept down that middle path. If there was someone out here, I would only have a split second to strike back or run. The only advantage I had was that they had no idea I was here, and it was as hard for them to see me as it was for me to see them, as long as I only checked the phone intermittently to keep its light to a minimum. Swipe. A picture of the middle path in gloom. All right, on a night sometime earlier this week, they'd gone this way. Had they again looped back somehow to drop this phone? I swiped ahead a few times to see multiple shots of the path I was on. I stopped at a shot of the knife-wielding man from the side. All that could be seen was a silhouette in deep forest dusk. Looking at the shot disturbed me. Was I witnessing the events leading up to someone's murder? I swiped back to the path shots and continued following their trail. When I reached the spot where the man's picture had been taken from the side, I heard something crunching out in the darkness. I froze for what felt like an eternity as dusk began to approach night. All my senses told me that something was out there. Something was waiting and watching with malicious intent, perhaps even with glee. I could feel it. As absolute darkness fell, a change came over the humid and dense air. The birds went quiet, and my ears stopped hearing their shrieking calls with a sudden internal echo. I thought I'd gone deaf for a moment, but I could still hear my own breathing. Moving step by step, back down the path and behind a boulder, I got out the phone to light my way and to check further pictures. Help! I turned my head suddenly to try to get a bead on the scream in the absolute silence. It sounded closer somehow. Help! It was loud this time, painfully loud, and I sliced at empty darkness. The light from the phone showed nothing ahead, just unmoving leaves and fronds. I held the knife forward with no idea what I could even do with it, until a series of flashes went off right behind my head. Was it behind me? I ran for my life. Down the dirt, climbed along the river canyon in the dark, leaped up the scree, sprained my ankle. That's what I remember. Limping along the path I'd come down earlier that day. I'd lost my backpack and the map inside it. I thought I could remember, but the jungle transforms at night. All of the landmarks I looked for were impossible to find in darkness, and I knew something was out there hunting me. I made it out of there, but not for nearly a day. I spent that night crammed into a small rock hollow with stones piled up to block the entrance, and only enough space for my knife to stab out, all night long. Help! Help! From right outside my hollow, then laughter, and random bits of conversation mimicking what the 2 girls had said to each other before danger had found them. It had stalked and watched them for hours before night had fallen. A foot, that was all that was left. A foot severed by powerful jaws. When dawn finally rolled around, my sleepless body practically dragged itself out of its own accord. I don't fully remember what happened when I returned to the hotel, but they took care of me, and I did not tell them I found her cell phone. And you know what? It's been 5 days, and I'm supposed to fly back to the States tomorrow night, but I happen to know I'll never make it. I sit in my hotel room and stew in my own nightmare. I can hear it calling from the deep of the night. It's out there mocking me still, waiting, because it knows I can't escape. All of those pictures were taken before they ever happened. All part of the horror in the jungle where time knows nothing of the strict structure of civilization. I only came out here because of that last picture, the only one that hasn't come true yet, the photo showing my death. So I sit here clutching the photo I printed out. I just don't want to be awake when it happens. It's creeping closer now. The cruelest part of this is the clock on the wall. I know the exact moment as it ticks closer and closer, second by second. It's slithering up around the bottom of the clock now, around the bottom of my heart, numbing. The concierge warned me, but I didn't listen. Jungle wasn't the right word, but he straight up said it. He told me directly, it eats people here.